We are this week wrapping up our Follow Me series that we have been doing over the course of the last month or so. We started right as you kicked school off, right about to kick school off, and so it's been a great thing, and it's been a time where we've walked through the book of Matthew, and we've seen how we can ultimately be leaders to others as we follow Jesus. So ultimately, if we want others to follow us in the right direction, then we have to first follow the right person, follow the right thing, or we're going to be leading them in the wrong direction. And so tonight we're going to be talking about the leader's foundation. The leader's foundation. So the first question is this: what is the purpose of a foundation? So just be thinking about that. What is the purpose of a foundation? Well, a foundation provides stability, right? Foundation is the thing in which the rest of the structure is built upon. And so if you do not have a strong foundation, ultimately the building or the thing that you're building will collapse over time, or it won't work, it won't function how it is supposed to. And so tonight we're going to look at a story about how do we start laying a foundation, because we talk about that a lot. You are somewhere between 7th and 12th grade, right around there, and you are laying a foundation that will impact you for the rest of your life. The things, the choices, the decisions that you make right now is laying that foundation of decisions you make, of who you are. You're starting to kind of form your identity and who you're going to hang out with and what you're going to be about. And so if you don't start laying the right thing right now, then it's all going to be for nothing. It's all going to not work out for you in the end. And so tonight we're going to see the idea of how can we build a good foundation, or what are some things that us as leaders should have as our foundation, or things that we should do so we can build a good foundation. So we're going to be in the book of Matthew chapter 7, and we're going to look at verses 24 through 29. And it says this: "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a sensible man who built his house on the rock. The rain fell, the rivers rose, and the winds blew and pounded the house, yet it didn't collapse, because its foundation was on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and doesn't act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain fell, the rivers rose, the winds blew and pounded that house, and it collapsed, and its collapse was great." When Jesus had finished this sermon, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, because he was teaching them like one who had authority and not like their scribes. And so tonight we're going to see three things about a leader's foundation that we can use in our life. The first thing we see is that leaders hear instructions. Leaders hear instructions. And so the passage starts out with this. It starts out with this idea at the first part of chapter 7 of everyone who hears these words of mine does these certain things. In order for us to follow Jesus and to be able to lead others to follow Jesus, we first have to hear what Jesus is saying, right? What do you think is the difference in hearing and listening? Or do you think there's a difference? What's the difference in hearing and listening? This is where you talk back now.
Doing is something that you do, and hearing is you're not hearing another.
Say that again.
Doing is something that you do, and hearing is just going out of the hearing.
I feel like you just said the same thing twice. I thought you said hearing is something that you do, and listening is something that you do too. That's what. So yeah, the difference in listening and hearing is that you can hear something and not act upon it, right? Listening to something, but is actually putting action to what you're being told to do. You can hear something all day. And so we're supposed to hear the instructions of God. All throughout the Bible, we're supposed to hear. We're supposed to be attentive to hear the voice of God. Sometimes you don't do things that your parents or your teachers tell you to do because honestly, just like I didn't hear Jack, you don't hear what they say. So some of it is you don't hear them because you're distracted by other things. So maybe you're on your phones. A lot of you might not be hearing me right now because you're looking down instead of up here. So a lot of you get distracted, and so these distractions keep you from hearing not only the instructions of the world, but these distractions keep you from hearing the things of God. Maybe you have so many different people speaking into your life that it's hard for you to actually hear the instructions that Jesus is giving to you. I'm very one-track minded. Anybody who knows me, if I'm trying to focus and concentrate on something, I don't care what you have to say. I'm not going to hear a word that you say. Because especially if there's something I really need to get done, you can talk to me all day long, and I might, yeah, and answer, but I have no idea what you're saying. And a lot of you probably do the same thing. So we might not hear because we have distractions. We might not hear because we have a lot of different voices. And honestly, a lot of times we don't hear because we don't want to hear. We don't want to hear about what's going on. So you might be receiving these instructions and you just don't want to hear them because you were pushing them out. You're pushing them away. All throughout the Bible is this idea of hearing the voice of God. There's the famous passage called the Shema in the Old Testament, and it says this: "Hear, O God, the Lord is one." And it's just the idea of hearing. And in the book of Revelation in chapter 2 and 3, 7 different times, the author of Revelation says that he who has ears should hear. Whenever I was a junior in high school, between my junior and senior year at summer camp, that verse is one that really turned my life around. Because I kept seeing time and time again in the Bible that it said, he who has ears should hear. And I'm like, well, I have ears, and I know God is talking to me, but I'm not listening to the things He's telling me to do. And it took God isolating me and actually getting me to listen, to try to hear His words for my life to change. Here in this story, we see that the one who makes a difference in their foundation is the one who hears the instructions. And all throughout your life right now, you're being told instructions on how to live your life. And it is vitally important that you start hearing and listening to some of these instructions that are going on. They might not all be beneficial, but I promise you, more than you realize will help you build that foundation that you need. So the first thing as leaders, and the first things leaders do is they hear. They hear what's going on. So leaders hear instructions. Secondly, leaders heed warning. Leaders heed warning. And this is that action part between hearing and listening. There was a warning given in this story here. And the warning was this: if you build your house on the sand, when the storms and the winds come, your house will be demolished, and the demolished will be great. If you build your house on a strong foundation, on the rock, then when the storm comes, it will still be standing. One of the people of this story heard and heeded the warning and built his house on a foundation that would last. One did not take into account, they did not act upon the instructions given, and they built their house on the sand. And you know what the scary thing is? Both houses probably looked good on the outside. I'm sure a lot of people congratulated and praised the man who had his house built on the sand. Just think about it. If it was built on the sand, we're maybe thinking an ocean or something like this. Of course, the closer you get, the sunset view, man, it was probably beautiful. His house probably looked very great on the outside. Even more, maybe, than the man's house who was built on the rock. Even the man who was scooted back, not as close to the beauty that the world had to offer. And he probably didn't receive as much praise as the man whose house was on the sand. But the difference was the foundation. One of them did not listen to the warning, and they probably thought, you know what? I'm closer. This looks great. You can't tell a difference on the outside between these two houses, and I honestly got a better view of what's going on. So I'm going to build it right here. You don't know what you're talking about. That destruction, that devastation, that won't happen to me. He didn't heed this warning, and what happened? The destruction was great. It was catastrophic what happened to his house. And the crazy thing is, And this is a warning I want you to heed. Both men received the storm that the world had to offer. Just because their foundation was on something good doesn't mean that the bad things of the world didn't happen. But the difference in the two is that when the storms hit, one of them made it out and one of them didn't. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of you are building your house on a foundation that the world is telling you is very beautiful and great. And on the outside, it will look very good. And you might even see success as far as this world has to offer. And you might receive praise as far as this world has to offer. But you're building your foundation on something that will not last. And if you don't heed, if you don't put action to the warnings of if you keep investing your life in the things of this world, there will be catastrophe in your life. Not maybe, not could be, there will be catastrophe in your life. You will receive punishment, or you will receive negative things based on the actions you do. And I promise you, you are sitting there right now thinking, Ryan, you're crazy, that'll never happen to me. And the way that I know that you're thinking that is because that's exactly the mindset that I had whenever I was your age. I thought I was invincible, and I thought I could handle anything this world had to offer. Even to the point that right after, I said that this verse, he who has ears, let him hear, rocked my world. That was the summer I surrendered to the ministry. And I go back home and tell my parents. And they were happy for me, but they were also kind of guarded because they knew more than I did what living for God actually meant. And they said, well, you need to talk to our pastor, who was Clark Brown. Talk to him. And he told me these words: Satan is going to attack you more now than he ever had in your life. So you need to be careful. And this was the response. This is how arrogant I was. I said, bring it on, I'm ready. And the next 4 to 5 months of my life were literally a living hell. Everything in my life crumbled around me because right after that, I kept trying to live the life I lived before. With my friends, and with parties, and with trying to chase girls, and all of these things that I thought would make me happy. And you know what it did? It made me have broken friendships. It made me have terrible self-worth about myself. Because I was seeking to have other people's opinion tell me who I was. God was speaking into my life and telling me that I was His child, that I was a leader. But I would have rather heard the voices of the people around me telling me these other things. Telling me, Ryan, you don't need to build your foundation on this rock. You don't need to scoot back away from the things of the world and actually build on Jesus. Get on closer. Dabble a little bit in this sin. You won't receive the catastrophe. You won't receive the devastation and the destruction that everybody else will. And you might think that. You might think it'll never hit you. But I promise you, one day, you're going to look back and say, I wish I would have listened to that warning. I bet that man, when the storm hit and his house was destroyed, looked back and said, I wish I would have built my foundation on something that would last. And this is what I tell you, hear these words and listen to these words, because right now, you are in a prime spot of your life to really start making easy decisions. It will never, and you might think this because middle school and high school is so tough and you have so many peer pressures, but it will never really be easier for you to follow Jesus than it is right now, because you will only be pulled at more once you get out. You think, well, I'm busy now. You don't know busy until you graduate and go to college, until you get a full-time job, until you start trying to balance a family. You have the most free time you'll ever have in your life right now. And you might think, you're crazy, you don't know my schedule. I promise you, that's the case. I didn't think I could get any more busy in high school until I went to college. I didn't think I could get any more busy whenever I was in college, and then I got married and got a full-time job. And right now, I don't think I can get any more busy in life, and one day I'll have kids and be like, what free time, what is that? What is going on? And that's the same thing with you. And if you're building your foundation on the things of the world, do you know where your time with God is going to go when everything else is pulling at your attention? It'll be the one that you push away. And you're probably already realizing this now because you're already probably starting to put God on the back burner of your life. well, I have a test this week, so I'm not going to do my quiet time. Oh, I got homework I got to do, so I'm not going to come to church tonight. Oh, I got these things going on. I got this extra practice. I'm not going to go to this youth event. I'm not going to do this thing with church. God always is the first thing that we start cutting out when we have things going on. Heed the instruction. Listen to this warning I'm giving you, because the more that you build on the world, when the storm hits, the harder of a devastation it's going to come. I promise you, I've had storms in my life. At 26 years old, I feel like I've encountered more things than many people my age, to be honest with you. There have been just, it seems like season after season, it just blows up. And I'm like, God, what more could happen? But in each and every storm, I see people in my life who are very close to God, who make it through the storm, and I see people who are not close to God and they struggle because of it. I have members in my family who have had very similar upbringings that I have, who chose to build their foundation on the sand, on the things of the world, because there was more instant gratification in that. It's easier to build your house on sand than it is rock. Because I don't know if you've ever tried to dig through rock, it doesn't work. I'm sure that the man who worked to build his house on the rock, during the process of doing it, he was probably like, I wish I'd have been like that guy, because it's much easier to stick a shovel in sand than it is a rock. And I'm sure he was like, why am I having to put in all of this work and all of this effort? And many times the Christian life feels like that. The world around you seems to be prospering so quick and easy, and you as a Christian, it just seems like you're working so hard, and you're putting in so much time and effort, and you're like, is this worth it in the end? But then look, after the storm hit, the man on the rock survived. So I say all this to say, man, listen to the warnings that are coming on around you. When you're driving a car one day, you will have dash lights that come on. Those dash lights that come on are warning signs that something in your vehicle is not going on like it should. I've seen, even in vehicles, the check engine light keeps coming on. People just put like a thing of tape over it. Or like, for me, in the 4Runner I used to drive, the gas light would never go off, even like when it was full. So we just unplugged the gas light. But guess what? If you ignore the warning signs, the car is going to break down. If I wouldn't have listened to my gas gauge, I would have ran out of gas and not been able to drive it. And the truth is, you might think, I'm just going to power through. I'm just going to ignore the warning signs in my life. And it might be okay for a little while. But one day you're going to look back and regret it. So leaders, hear. Have an attentive ear to what God is saying. Get the distractions out of your life. Stop letting so many people speak into you. Listen to what God, be open to what God is trying to say. Then once you hear and take action, heed the warning. And then finally, leaders help others. Leaders help others. So we see that at the end of this story, after Jesus talked about this thing and talked about how the collapse was great, it says when he finished the sermon, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, because he was teaching them like one who had authority. Jesus didn't just have this thought in his head or have this idea and sit on his hands and not do anything about it. Jesus taught this truth to the people around him. And the truth is, you're supposed to be that same type of person that Jesus was. You're supposed to teach and tell and help other people around you. If you're to look at your handout, the question is there. What do you worship? And that might seem like an odd question to come after this point, but we asked this question on week 2 when we were talking about Jesus and his temptation in the desert. And we said that we could value, or we could evaluate what we worship by what we spend our most time thinking about, what we spend our most money on, the things we spend the most of our time on. What we worship will pour over into the fact of whether we're going to help others or not. Because if you build your house on the sand, if you build your house on the things of the world, guess what? The only person you're going to think about is yourself. The only person you're going to care about is yourself. And the truth is, and just going ahead and take this truth and keep it close to you, because whether you want to believe it or not, it's true. The people in your life who are not following Jesus don't really care about you more than they care about themselves. And you might think that's not true. Just wait, they will hurt you one day. If they don't have Jesus in the center of their life, guess what? Their decisions are going to be made ultimately about what is best for them. And that might seem like very cynical, but it's the truth. People who build their foundation on Jesus can love others and care about others more and ultimately help them more than the people who are of this world. Because the Bible tells us we love because He first loved us. And we can't truly help others until we follow and experience the love of Jesus. I saw this quote that says this: as spiritual beings, we are drawn to God intuitively and cannot be truly content except in a relationship with Him. Basically what that means is each and every one of us are drawn to God. It's just part of our nature to want to have something to do with God. But guess what? A lot of us rebel. And a lot of the people in your life are going to be telling you that the things of the world are okay. And you're going to be trying to convince yourself, even if the Holy Spirit is convicting you otherwise, that the life that you're living apart from God is okay. And I'm here to tell you this. As a child of God, you cannot live a satisfied, happy life outside of a faithful relationship with God. Because if you are living in sin, and if you're building this foundation on the things of the world, and it doesn't bother you at some level, then the chances are you don't truly know who Jesus is. And that's just a fact. It's just part of it. And one thing that really impacts me, and a question that really gnaws at my mind is, to what level are we going to hold ourselves accountable for when it comes to being leaders to other people around us? So we're talking about a foundation, but a foundation also provides a platform. And all of us have more of a foundation about Jesus than a majority of the world probably does. Just the simple fact that we live in America and in the South, we have more of a biblical foundation than most of the world around us ever will. And the thing that scares me the most is that I'm going to maybe get to heaven one day and I'll be like, God, look at all these things I did for you. And He'll say, why didn't you do more? Look at this guy who lived over in this country where it was illegal for them to have a relationship with Jesus. And look how many great things for the kingdom he did. And look what you did on the foundation you were given, on the opportunities that we were given. Man, you are given so many opportunities and so many chances, and we're going to be held accountable with the talents that God gave you, with the relationships that God gave you, with the foundation that God gave you. One day, you're going to stand before God and have to answer to Him on how faithful you were with those things you were given, on the foundation that you laid. And it would be terrible for you to stand before your Creator one day and say, God, I went to church every single Sunday, every single Wednesday for my entire life. I was faithful in my youth group, and I was faithful in college and all these things, but I never led anyone to you. I never used my potential for you. I laid a great foundation, and I never did anything with it. You have so much potential. But the crazy thing about potential is, it really doesn't produce anything until you put work to it. There's a lot of people that you see in your life who have a ton of potential, but until you put action to that potential, it's just potential. It's not success. It's not anything great. And you see this in the sports world all the time. You see so many athletes who have all the potential in the world to succeed, all the God-given abilities to reach it or to make the next level, and they just blow it. They just throw it away. And there are so many of you who have so much potential to do great things for the kingdom of God, and you're throwing it away because you would rather build your foundation where it's easy. You would rather build your foundation where your friends are telling you to build your foundation. You would rather live your life for yourself than you would rather live your life for God. And I'm here to tell you that is not worth it. It's not worth it. So this is what I would not only encourage but challenge you to do. I'm going to call the band to come back up here and to get ready to play our last song. And the last song is one that we're very familiar with. And the last song is, "Oh Come to the Altar." And this song, the whole point of this song is that The altar is the thing that you lay things at. You sacrifice to God. The altar in the Old Testament was the place where people laid down their sacrifices so that God would turn their judgment, His judgment, away from them. And when we sing, "O come to the altar," the Father's arms are open wide. What we're singing, whether we realize it or not, is, "God, I'm willing to lay down my life before you so that you can do a mighty work in my life." And my challenge to you tonight is this: don't just sing those words and not mean it. Sing those words, and while you're singing them, truly tell God with your heart, "God, my life is yours. My foundation is yours." When Jesus asked the disciples who He thought they were versus who the crowds thought they were, Peter made the great statement, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus said, "I'll now call you Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." The rock and our foundation of life, and the foundation that you should be building your life upon, is Jesus Christ. Nothing else in this life truly matters other than Jesus. And if you're not pointing others to Jesus, and if your life isn't utterly consumed by Jesus, then do that tonight. There is no better time to do that. So my question to you is this: if you were to leave this room tonight, just in the state that you are, do you think God would be satisfied with the foundation that you've laid? Or do you think that He would want more from you? And it's not about us working to God so that He will accept us, because that's not how it works. But there is responsibility on our part. God has given us this gift of Jesus, but it's our responsibility to receive the gift. And so if you're in here tonight and you've never started, and you never began a relationship with Jesus, you're not walking with Him daily, then you can't even start to begin to lay that foundation, because Jesus is the ultimate foundation. There will be leaders around the room tonight when we start singing this song. If you aren't satisfied, if you aren't content, if you aren't sure about your relationship with Him, man, come talk to one of us. But maybe you do have a relationship with Jesus, and you're just not building that foundation how you should. Maybe you started and the work got too hard, or you listened to all these other distractions and you stopped listening to God. Tonight, during our invitation, man, tell God that your life is His again, and that you're sorry you took it away in the first place. Man, hear God's warnings. Put action to those warnings. And then, man, help others. There are people in here who want to take that next step, but they need your support, because they feel like if they step out, they'll be all alone. And this should be, more than any other place, this should be the place where we encourage and support one another. This whole idea of revive, the idea of coming in, worn down, feeling defeated, feeling tired, and just ready to give up, and then being connected back to the gospel so that it rejuvenates us and restores us to go out and to provide life to the death of the world around us. That's what I hope this place is. We don't just call this revive as some pithy, catchy saying. We do it because this is a place where broken hearts are healed, where life without purpose is given purpose. And your life can have purpose and it can have meaning, but only if your foundation is on Jesus. What foundation are you building your life upon?